You're watching Public Comment every Thursdays at 8 a.m. The live stream. Detroit is different in Bridge Detroit. Local politics of Detroit. Welcome back. Welcome back to Public Comment here in the Detroit is Different Studios. I'm Khary Frazier, co-host of this, and we talk a lot about municipal politics of the city of Detroit, and it would not be possible without the man that makes the notebook that keeps up with city council in those hearings, the open council hearings, and a lot of the other meetings, and a lot of the other back and forth in the city of Detroit that this is based upon. Malachi Barrett, how are you today?
Good morning. I'm doing great. Good to see you.
Got the tall glass of coffee for this morning, right?
Right. From the DMC Medical Center. I don't know if you can see that. Probably not. We'll fade it
Okay.
out. I have no idea where I got this.
Probably one of those meetings.
It's coffee from home, though.
Okay. Okay. All right. So this week, public comment, we are kicking off like usual. Let's see what's happening this week in public comment. We're talking about first fast track housing ordinance, and it's going to be more hearings and everything on this, but we're talking about housing a whole lot, really like affordable housing, what that means. It's a Detroit issue, but an American issue, but especially here in the city of Detroit. And also Chief White advances in the job interview process with D-Win. So you see the brother that's leading a lot and talking about this fast track program right there. So Detroit's fast track tax break ordinance is available for the public to review and discuss before being voted on by council. A public hearing was set for October 16th at the council's Budget, Finance, and Audit Committee. The proposed ordinance creates new tax incentives for affordable housing developments with reduced rent. Instead of paying property taxes, developers pay a service charge based on rental rates. Tax discounts are larger for projects that offer deeper cuts in rent. Housing projects in formerly vacant buildings can receive a tax break if rent is affordable for someone earning 120% of the area median income. You know, I'm always talking about that median income. It needs to be mean income, median income, median income. Median income is not a great economic qualifier, I believe. Median income for Detroit metro area that equals $2,160 for a one bedroom unit and $2,592 for a two-bedroom unit. New housing projects that are affordable for people earning 80% or less of the area median income are eligible for tax breaks. That equals $1,440 for a one bedroom unit and $1,728 for a two bedroom unit. Projects that offer rent at 60% the area median income can receive a larger tax break. That equals $1,080 for a one bedroom unit and $1,296 for a two bedroom unit. City officials said the ordinance will expand development of affordable housing and make it easier to grant tax breaks. To address housing affordability, which we know is sorely needed, we need to build a rehabilitate more housing units, says Rebecca Lavo, Director of Preservation at Detroit's Housing and Revitalization Department. So, with that being said, that's the article direct. I know it's not a lot of discussion per se this week about that, but Malachi, what's just the overall tone you think of the efforts of council and the executive department of the mayor kind of working together about what affordability is and how much do you feel this is a municipal issue itself?
Yeah, I mean they're united on this. There's a majority of the council that is ready to pass this ordinance. It needs to go through the process though, so this is kind of where we're at right now. The draft language was released, and a public hearing has been set, and there will be some discussions at the budget committee, which is chaired by Fred Durhall, and I'm sure they will bring folks who are from the housing department, from DEGC, some of these other public-private organizations that incentivize development in the city to talk about the details. What stood out to me, wanted to kind of keep people updated on this as it moves forward. Affordable housing is a huge topic in the city. We don't have enough of it. What is built does not always reach the level of affordability that people are looking for. So once this language became available, I thought it was important to show people what actually the affordability, guidelines for this would be. And so those numbers that you gave there are the monthly rents for these different projects. For anything being built that's new, if it doesn't have 80% AMI, if it's not affordable for people making 80% of the area median income, it doesn't qualify for this. Um, but as you can see there, projects that offer almost $1,500 for a one bedroom unit, you probably add a couple $100 on there for parking and
Mhm.
for utilities and power and water and all that stuff, internet, so on. Um, does that reach a level of affordability that people are really looking for? You get a deeper tax break for offering something that's closer to $1,000 for a bedroom unit and $1,300 for a two bedroom unit. Um, but we talk about the kind of AMI standard on this show, and this just gives folks a better idea of what will be qualifying. um, the service charge is kind of interesting because, instead of basically this whole thing works by instead of charging property taxes, they replace it with this service fee that is based on how much money they're making in rent revenue. So basically, for something that is, charging 80% AMI, and sorry to use all these terminologies. But instead of paying property taxes, they're charged 4% of their rent, and
Mhm.
that's how they come up with, like, the fee that's levied. If you're at that next deepest level of affordability, the 60% AMI, their service charge rate is 1% of the rent that they make, they have to pay to the city as a charge. So I think that's, like, pretty significantly cheaper than what the property taxes will probably be. We don't have any, like, specifically hard numbers on that, but that just gives you an idea of, like, how they are trying to, um, make up for the loss of revenue. Uh,
Yeah, and it's always tough. And this is, like I say, this is not such a Detroit's focused issue as much as a national issue. You look at, and then it's the lens of how this is, but so many of the landlords, and that did happen here in Detroit, that were HUD landlords, stayed in spaces and properties and did not necessarily renovate or care about those properties when they had low income, quote unquote, residents there. And when those hub subsidies were no longer available, or closer to like the end of the subsidy time being ended, the way that those rents sometimes quadrupled, and definitely left people leaving those spaces. It's back to, I believe, the right property owner to steward that property, and that right property owner could. It's a dance because business is so built on egos and personalities. It doesn't mean did not do anything, but I do believe that reviewing and looking at what happened in the HUD process should be explored more so, because that still is very prevalent. I'm guessing probably some HUD money may be going into these initiatives themselves, but government getting involved and looking to regulate rents, being that oftentimes corporations have more access to government and than the general public does. So residents sometimes end up on the short end of the stick of, even if they end up with a place that may be more affordable, is it being kept up and is it being cared for and taken into consideration? Because a lot of people get into real estate to maximize as much money as they possibly can, and the subsidy is cool if it can be a part of the portfolio, but it's not really what a lot of the developers are looking for. So how do you find those developers that find those intrinsic values and social capital and being a part of community? I look to the way that the Detroit People's Food Co-op was developed and the work put into that, and some of the backstory that I'm familiar with, and saying, okay, this is powerful, but that's an effort that took decades to, pour in years and years and years and years and so many people. Um, where does that development stand when even renters themselves can be so transactional? And there's a large class of landlords that may have one or two properties, possibly two family flats, that may not necessarily be able to expand and scale up to something like this, but have been working with more of the community. Like when I think about a lot of the people that rent in my community and who those landlords are, it is more of a balanced relationship, but also it can be exploited. It's the bigger question that I return to. Like, how much do you think government can really play a role in ensuring that landlords are being equitable and understanding of citizens in a city that struggles with poverty so pervasively?
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's a really tough question. I mean, I think the city has a large responsibility or has taken up a large responsibility in financing the construction of these projects in terms of whether they're inclusive or responsive to the needs of residents. I mean,
Yeah,
there's requirements to have them be ADA accessible, things like that that are worked out. I mean, to accept Section A or Section 8 housing has been part of a discussion of the last few community benefits agreements for some of the larger projects that have come through. So, but those have been requested by residents themselves through that negotiation process. So you could say the city kind of facilitated some of that conversation, but maybe doesn't have a process for securing it outside of the CBA. I mean, I think HRD is or they're aware of some of these things, and they probably try to work with developers to include them. But it all comes down to money. I mean, my
yeah,
my sense is it all comes down to what the developer is, out of the kindness of their heart, what kind of revenue they're willing to give up by offering discounted rates so that people in the city can afford them, or to say, well, I could charge you guys, $100 a month for, to use my parking lot, but I'm going to include parking with it, um, or, any other, variety of things that we could talk about when it comes to like accessibility and those other kind of things that keep people out of these housing developments. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think if you were to talk to people at the EGC, at some, at the housing department, some of these city agencies that, um, work to encourage affordable housing, they would probably be able to tell you things that they're doing on that respect. But, I tend to see kind of the main focus of their responsibility being around incentivizing the creation of these
yeah,
units in the first place, and by
yep,
making the financing easier for them, basically, by
hmm,
making it more quote unquote affordable for the developer to build. It's not affordable for developers to build affordable housing,
yeah,
as they're quick to remind, because they're simply
yeah. You're losing so
having
much
to lose
costs.
money. Yeah, and things are just expensive to build, and then
Yeah,
on and on and on. So the government solution there is to try to like step in the gap and try to replace some of that cost burden by subsidizing, by giving taxpayer money to them.
yeah. As we get into the next story about Chief James White and just that role right there of where things stand with a sitting police chief right now. Police Chief James White and Michael Hunter advanced to the next round of interviews for the CEO of Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Network. White and Hunter, the current president of Team Wellness Center at DWIM, were among 7 candidates interviewed by a search committee on September 27th. Uh, each candidate was given 5 identical questions posed by members of the DWIN Board of Directors. White and Hunter will next appear for a second round of interviews with stakeholders, staff, board members on October 14th. White is licensed mental health counselor, but said he would be perceived as an outsider after serving 28 years in law enforcement. Law enforcement, in large part, is a paramilitary organization. That is so true. White said during his interview, many will look at me as possibly the police. I'm pretty sure they will. And I'll have to do a lot of work to earn not only their respect, but their trust. I'm the person that can do it. Hunter said he's focused on improving inclusiveness during his time at DWIN and is seeking the CEO position to improve access to health services that residents may not know about. So, with that being said, I pulled this because this is just a discussion about being in public service and being a public servant and entering another facet of that. DWIN is still in the space of public service, but a different dynamic of public service. And where does that post lie? We've seen this before. Um, I think most notably someone running for mayor now when Santil Jenkins stepped down from Detroit City Council, transitioned to lead Thaw. And this would be one of those things where it's like, okay, where does the public look at something like this? And this is just a perspective. I do believe that Chief White, and with his background and many of the things that he speaks to, and being open to different things, looks at mental health as being a big part of it. And I definitely do believe that, when you call the police, chances are you're going through something where understanding of where you're at mentally could be very important. So to know that you have a person leading officers with that presence of mind is deep. So DWIN, a huge organization that has grown more and more, and it's great that it has grown as mental health has become more of a topic people talk about, but it's ever present just throughout American society for so many reasons. In a recent interview where I interviewed Godwin of Young Village, which it makes sense that ever since the advent of the camera phone and really the need of Instagram, the increase of so many people being depressed. Has gone up, which makes sense because you're looking at so many other people in their lives and things like that. But what people are dealing with, microaggressions and a lot of stuff, it is here and heavy. And someone with a police background could definitely be advantageous because that's usually where things end up. But this is more a discussion, Malachi. What do you think about a person that's in that public service role transitioning to something else, especially with chief of police? Public safety is so often discussed anytime Detroit is brought up. I mean, even to the fact that, the movie RoboCop is here, Beverly Hills Cop is here. Like a lot of cop movies through the 80s are taking place here in the 90s because it's like the whole concept of the dangers in Detroit. So, where does that stand just in the period of like, capacity and bandwidth, and because that is such a looming idea of the dangers and the public safety of Detroit, where where does that exist?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an interesting question that the search committee at DWIN is probably grappling with. Is it an asset or a liability that Chief White, one of the two top candidates for the CEO position, has such a long career in law enforcement? I think you could probably look at it both ways, right? I mean,
Yeah.
he, has not only spent nearly 3 decades in law enforcement. Before coming back to DPD, he was leading the civil rights department at the state. Not for very long. I think it was like under a year or maybe close to a year. He's a licensed mental health professional. So he does have, some of that background. And since becoming chief of police, one of the first things he did and one of the things he's continued to kind of bring attention to is this issue of, people not having a place to turn to when they're in a mental health crisis. And, the launching of the co-response unit in a partnership with DWIN, basically brings health professionals alongside police and especially trains police to respond to people going through crisis. Um, so you could look at all of that and say, this is a police officer who kind of understands um, the challenging side of people who are a danger to themselves and others, and what do we do about that? And he's got that perspective. You probably also could say, well, we don't necessarily want somebody who's associated with the criminal justice system or the prison industrial complex, or however you look at it. Um, running the mental health provider for the region. And I don't know. I think it's going to be up to the search committee at DWIN and the board of directors to decide, if his experience is helpful or hurtful in that case. I mean, I think for the questions that they kind of posed in this initial interview, it was a lot of like, what do you see the strengths or weaknesses of the organization? What experience do you have like leading a large organization? I mean, he certainly has that. He, is in charge of some 500 officers. It's a pretty large organization. He's had a long career in it. I think it kind of makes sense for him as a career move. I'm interested in what this would mean for Detroit to lose their chief of police at this moment, where we have crime rates declining, but still at a level that even the chief himself would say is far too
Yeah.
high. Particularly with gun violence. Would his predecessor or would his replacement, I guess, Chief White's replacement, would he be supportive? They be supportive of the shot stoppers? Would they be supportive of green light? Would they be supportive of the community violence intervention programs that have been stood up? I mean, what happens to all of these various like police initiatives if somebody else comes in the helm? I mean, I think that's something we should be thinking about.
And those are the questions too. And then also, it looks like a lot of signs that Mayor Duggan may not necessarily seek re-election here in the city of Detroit. And it's just also been so commonplace that new mayors hire their own police chiefs. So that plays a role in this science too. And I'm not necessarily saying that I don't think it's means that Chief White would need to make a move, but these are the other realities and the variables in the equation as that decision is being made too. And he may be thinking like, I'd rather move now than to be in limbo with what could be continuing and carrying on. But that does leave so many questions about what's been happening with public safety throughout the city of Detroit. And as you all see, this is more condensed one and more thinking in that style of a public comment. And we certainly know there's going to be some heavy discussions, because even going back to sticking to so many of these discussions about what is affordable rent and affordable housing as well. The Renters Commission, that is big, and I'm looking forward to how that'll unpack and unfold and discussing how that will be made up and what that looks like in the city of Detroit. So that'll be coming soon, amongst some other things. So keep watching public comment. And Detroit is different. Malachi, tell them what they need to know.
BridgeDetroit.com, BridgeDetroit.com. I don't think I can say it 5 times fast. That's where we're at. Free content, no paywalls. Subscribe to our newsletters. They come in your inbox. My city council notebook, which a lot of this is based on, even though we don't get to everything in there, there's some kind of other newsy little items that you might be interested in. That comes out every Wednesday. We also have coverage of local food scenes, arts and culture, and just all the news you need to know. That's all online at BridgeDetroit.com. We've got socials. We're on Instagram. We're on X for you freaks who are out there still on the Twitter, like me. I've got it open on my laptop right now. Distracting me during this show. But yeah, thank you for your support. We're a nonprofit newsroom here in the city, and we really rely on your feedback and support to know what's going on and what's important to our readers.
That works.
Last year, if you missed it, you missed a lot. This year, you can't miss it. It's community, it's sharing, it's networking, it's all things good and uplifting for
My Natural Hair Show 2024, Saturday, October 26th. You don't want to miss the creativity, the culture, and the community of all of this flavor and flair into natural hair. This is the 4th time around, and we're doing it bigger. And also an international food marketplace. It's an experience that Saturday, October 26th, you do not want to miss. At the Andy Art Center, 3000 Finkel. Tickets on Eventbrite.